BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, Nedheads. Hello, Black Box Battalion. Today is Tuesday. Welcome to this special bonus series here on Black Box Online Radio, where I discuss the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, perhaps the most famous missing persons case in the world. And in this episode, I will be looking at the theory that implicates her parents as the culprits and the responsible parties for her disappearance, as well as responding to the Deception Detective podcast. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment down below if you have something to say about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And I am your host, Box Ned. Firstly, I have several different episodes about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann here on this channel. There has been a lot of breaking news in her case recently, and a suspect has been identified, a person of interest rather, and his name is Christian Bruckner. That is not his real name, that is an alias that was created for him. His name has been protected under German privacy laws, but it is available online if you search enough. And a lot of the focus has gone on to him. But for years, many people were looking at Madeleine's parents, Jerry and Kate McCann, as being responsible for her disappearance and possibly her murder. So before I outline that particular theory, I would like to just provide the most basic introduction that has been generated for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann and the night that she went missing, May 3rd, 2007, from Praia da Luz, Portugal. Madeleine was 3 years old, but she was just shy of her 4th birthday. Madeleine McCann disappeared from her family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, after her parents, Kate and Jerry, went to a tapas restaurant with friends who were checking on the children in a staggered system. At approximately 10 p.m., Kate McCann returned to the apartment to find Madeleine gone and alerted the restaurant and the police. The evening of, the McCanns and 7 friends went to a tapas restaurant located about 50 to 100 yards from their apartments. They had a staggered system of checks. A system was put in place for the parents to take turns checking on their children who were asleep in the apartment. And I always come back to this because it's very confusing. They are not checking on all of the children every 30 minutes or every 15 minutes. People would check on their own children or maybe 1 or 2 others. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann makes his first check on the children and finds them asleep. At 9:30 p.m., another parent, Russell O'Brien, checks on the children while his own daughter is sick. At 9:55 p.m., the Smith family witness a man carrying a child matching Madeleine's description. At 10 o'clock p.m., Kate McCann goes to check on the children and discovers that Madeleine was missing. And that is something that has been posted on the timeline, but I actually think that there's something that's going to be a little bit more important to the discussion. And before Kate finds Madeleine missing, they're saying the Smith family. We should also say the Tanners. Specifically, Jane Tanner is the one who witnessed a man carrying a child who matched Madeleine's description around the time of the disappearance or before the disappearance, and that man has since been known as the Tanner Man. And you guys already know that a lot of people do not believe that he is strongly involved right now, but for a very long time, he was the prime suspect, this person X. And right now, though, I would like to just list off the most basic introductory theory that would implicate the parents. It's one that I supported for a while, because from 2018 to 2019, I followed the story of Madeleine McCann rather closely, but that was 6 years ago at the time of this recording. And I confess that a lot of information leaked out. And I started out, going into this 3 weeks in, I joined many people in thinking that the parents were guilty of her murder, and that it was something that was done illegally. They did an illegal set of actions that caused her death. I don't think that they were viciously trying to murder her, and I didn't think that at the time. But I was under the impression, belief, opinion, and the mindset that the parents were illegally giving their children sleep aid drugs because they didn't want to use this type of night crash system. They perhaps had even been doing it regularly. There are some reasons why people think this. The first is that they were both medical doctors, Jerry and Kate McCann, and They were people who would have access to these resources. And also, when Madeline went missing, the twins, her two siblings, did not wake up at all. We're talking about doors slamming shut and Kate's just freaking out in the apartment, according to her story. And she's saying that the twins just, didn't wake up through anything. And some people believe that that's most likely because they were sedated. But some things are going to become very critical and very important for the timeline of the disappearance. And there were a lot of genuine red flags that were raised about, like, were the parents actually guilty, or was this just a case of a horrible, horrible abduction and murder? Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. But the sleep aid drug theory would go something like this: that the parents regularly gave their children these sedatives or perhaps combinations of sleep drugs because they just wanted them to stay in bed and to stay quiet. Madeline passed away, and Jerry and Kate put on the facade. First, they would have moved her body to a shelf in the bedroom, as horrible as that sounds, and then Madeline must have been dead for some time, and then at a certain point, they either took her to a different location or they took her to perhaps even the ocean, and this created several different pieces of evidence. In 2019, I did an 8-part response to the Netflix docuseries The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and they showed videos of the very famous cadaver dog alerts. And the cadaver dog alerts were in the apartment performed by the dog Eddie, who was trained to search for the scent of a dead body. There were 2 cadaver dog alerts in the apartment. One was on the shelf that I just mentioned in a cabinet, and one was behind the couch. And a lot of people are just looking at the timeline that I read off to you at the beginning of this episode, and please excuse that stuff about it, how this one excluded the Tanner Man sighting. I think that that's a very important thing. But this whole thing about Jerry goes to the apartment at 9:05 and he says that the children are asleep, and then at 10 o'clock Kate says Madeline is missing. Well, okay, so if we're going to just be using these timelines, would that have been enough time for decomposition to have taken over so that a cadaver dog could have been alerted to Madeline's scent? Well, a lot of people think no, that it would take more than an hour. However, if she had already been dead for quite some time and then Jerry and Kate are just putting on a ruse because they don't want to get arrested, if they were illegally giving their children sleep aid drugs, they would be charged possibly with murder, because if you do an illegal set of actions that causes somebody's death, that can go beyond manslaughter. That can be murder. It all depends on how the lawyers play it out. So they put Madeline's body on the shelf, and then the cadaver dog sighting could have, or the cadaver dog alert behind the couch, could have actually been because a blanket or a stuffed animal that had been close to her body was placed there, that it was just thrown to the side behind the couch. And yes, I know the couch is in a different room than the bedroom, but then an object or something that had been in close proximity to Madeline's decomposing body was put behind the couch, and that's what created the second alert. And this creates a bigger time frame and a bigger window of opportunity, because one of the theories that I really just, figured out in my own mind was the one put forward by Gonzalo Amaral, the lead detective in the case, and he thought the sleep aid drug theory was true, but he thought the drugs wore off, but Madeline was still disoriented, and she was heavily disoriented. She went out looking for her parents. She got up and stood on the edge of the sofa. Then she fell forward and hit her head on the ledge while she was trying to look out a window to see Jerry or Kate, and then she broke her neck and she was behind the couch for an hour. And this becomes very important because one of the people who went in to check on the apartment was named Matthew Oldfield, but in 2019, he reportedly admitted that he didn't actually see Madeleine McCann in the apartment. And the other absolute biggest and most shocking thing about this system of checks with the top of 7 is Kate says that she walked in to the apartment, and then she just looks in and everything seems fine, and then the door, like the draft, slams the door shut, and then the window is open, and it's like, well, she just didn't completely see Madeline in the apartment when she's supposed to be checking to see if Madeline is in the apartment. These are the reasons why people suspect them. Their stories make no sense, they run into hiccups, and they run into just major challenges. However, With that being said, Gonzalo Amaral would heavily alter his theory, because the McCanns would ultimately stay in Portugal for a while. They rented a car, and there was also a cadaver dog alert on a pair of keys that were owned for the rental car. And Gonzalo Amaral concocted this theory where he said that the McCanns knew that Madeleine was dead, and then they, or an accomplice, took her body and placed her in an industrial freezer for a period of time, and then they moved her to a final resting place. And I'm just like, whoa, now wait a second. You can't just throw around something like that when you're the lead detective in the case and a public figure. Who was this accomplice? How did this accomplice do that? How did this accomplice have enough time to perform those particular actions? I mean, one of the alternative theories is, as I just told you, that her body was placed on a shelf for an extended period of time. They waited for the opportune moment, and then they took her to the beach or the ocean, so that wouldn't even necessarily have to have occurred on the night of. Now, there is the video series out there from the Deception Detective podcast, and the host of that program is an attorney who's trained in statement analysis, and the reason why I wanted to go through his videos was I actually found that I disagree with a lot of what he says. Sometimes it's interesting to look at people who have conflicting viewpoints, who have differences in opinions, who think about the subjects in different ways. And with the Deception Detective, I learned about him because of his JonBenet Ramsey videos, and I have to say, his Madeleine McCann series is way, way lower quality than the JonBenet ones, because in the JonBenet series, even though not everything he says is completely acceptable to me, or it's not something that makes perfect sense to me, he was explaining about how, okay, I'm an attorney trained in statement analysis. When somebody says something like this is a red flag of deception. When somebody says something like that, this is a red flag for deception. He would explain his thought process. He would explain why he thought that somebody was lying. And, I mean, all of this stuff really just wasn't present in the Madeleine McCann videos for the most part. A little bit, but for the most part. And all of his Madeleine McCann videos have been assembled into an 8-hour compilation that is available on YouTube. And no, I didn't make it through the whole thing, but I saw quite a bit. And I'm going to play a couple clips for you in just a second so I can show you his type of process. But in terms of his theory, he's saying that he also believes that the McCanns were giving Madeleine sleep aid drugs. They realized that she was dead, and he believed that they disposed of her body in the ocean. And the reasons that he is looking at aren't anything to do with the timelines. They're not anything to do with some type of malicious intent with the parents. He's talking about how he believes that, they gave her the drugs, it was an accident, and he's trying to analyze their linguistic choices. Why are they saying these particular things in the interview? And I'm going to play a clip for you that's about 4 or 5 minutes long, and it's a lengthy one, but then we're going to have a particular response.
Are Jerry and Kate McCann lying about what happened to Madeleine? I'm the Deception Detective. I'm an attorney trained in statement analysis, and this channel is all about exposing liars and manipulators. Before we proceed, please take a moment to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. In this episode, we're going to analyze the second part of an interview Madeleine's parents did with a Swedish talk show to see if we can figure out through their language what actually happened.
Which one of these media speculations was most shocking, do you think? Was most hurtful?
I mean, there were loads. I guess the worst thing is if they say that she's dead and there's no evidence, because if she's dead, there's no search.
I think the other thing, just to go back to that, Frederick, is that we had an interview with the police, which Kate details in her book, an unofficial interview, and basically to the senior officers were saying...
So if you've seen the first part of this video, right, we've analyzed the first half of this interview. And Madeleine's parents are not very good liars. So they leak lots of information in the words that they use. And leakage is common with liars because you always speak based on everything you know. So if you talk enough, eventually you let the truth slip out, right? Knowing the truth and trying to keep it out of your language while trying to fabricate something else is very difficult. And one of the reasons liars trip up so much. And part of the leakage with Madeleine's parents is in responses to some of these interview questions, they reveal what they're most sensitive about. So let's listen to that very first question again. The host asked them which rumors or something affected you the most. And whatever response they give means that's the one that they're most sensitive about, probably because that's the one that's true. Right? So if I call you purple, that doesn't hurt your feelings because you're not purple. But let's say you are low IQ and I call you low IQ, that you will be sensitive about because it's true, right?
Which one of these media speculations was most shocking, do you think? Was most hurtful?
I mean, there were loads.
So which speculation was the hardest for you? Their answer here is going to be revealing because there were lots of speculations, right? There are speculations that they were negligent. There are speculations that the daughter was kidnapped. There are speculations that they actually sexually abused Madeleine. So listen to the response here. It's revealing, right? Out of all these options, which one they pick to say hurt them the most.
Loads. I mean, I guess the worst thing is if they say that she's dead and there's no evidence, because if she's dead, there's no search.
I think the other thing...
Right, so they said the one that hurt them the most is saying that Madeleine is dead. Probably because that's the one that's true. And they know it's true because I think that they killed her. Personally, I think they did it by accident, if you saw the first part of my analysis.
Just to go back to that, Frederick, is that we had an interview with the police, which Kate details in her book, an unofficial interview. And basically, two of the senior officers were saying to us, tell us what happened, we know what happened. And I was in tears saying, do you have evidence that Madeleine is dead? Because if you do, as her parent, we need to know. And they were saying, it's coming, it's coming. And that, you know, the pressure that was put on us to confess to a crime of hiding your own daughter's body and to say that you were going to pursue us for murder. And it's not unique to Portugal. This happens with police the world over. It's happened to many different people. It's happened to other parents in similar situations to us.
How is
So I think that the Portuguese police were accusing them of murdering Madeleine because just like me, right, and just like lots of my viewers, they picked up on the red flags in what the parents did say and what they didn't say. Even in this interview, they expressed no curiosity about what Madeleine is going through right now or any curiosity about whether or not the kidnapper is watching this and might demand a ransom, right? There's a possibility to get her back. Or even expressing any fear about what she might be experiencing right now. She's still alive.
And once again, that was from the Deception Detective podcast. It's just called Deception Detective here on YouTube. So the immediate response is, I do like what he's saying about how when somebody is telling a lie, they know all the information, and they're trying to put out some of the real information that is truthful, hiding the information that is secretive, and then they add additional parts of fabricated information. They add additional things that are not true. So that's what creates these types of awkward statements. However, in this one, I didn't necessarily hear too many things that couldn't simply be explained by just awkward and uncomfortable English language usage. Now, there is a very big issue here, and I completely am on everybody's side when they say that Jerry McCann, the father, comes across as very cold, he comes across as very bothersome, and I know that it's a gut feeling, and I'm somebody who's been critical of other people for talking about gut feelings, but I don't like the way he conducts himself in the interviews. When the deception detective is saying all these things about, well, you know, he doesn't really seem like a grieving father. He doesn't really seem like, you know, somebody who is actually saying things that he genuinely believes, and he also seems like he may have been coached for this stuff. All right, absolutely. I'm on I'm on board with that. Now, that doesn't mean that he committed any specific crime. That's just a very odd type of response. And it's not me, it's not him, it's the entire planet Earth. Everybody began to notice that Jerry just comes across as very cold, and just there is something that is very unlikable about his personality. It's the whole concept of, if you're talking to someone, and that person is telling you a story, and you're like, wait a second, is that really true? Or if you're just having a conversation with someone and you're like, this person is bothering me, and it's the entire package, it's the whole reason. Now, Kate is definitely coming across as more personable. She's also providing a lot of explanations about how people are just, very hypercritical of her behavior and her actions and her choices, but at the same time, she's just like, well, I mean, this tragedy happened, and we didn't necessarily know how to respond to it. And perhaps you also heard that line there about how the worst thing would be that if Madeleine were dead. That's something that Kate shared, and that's a statement that was echoed by Jerry. And then the deception detective is saying, well, they probably said that because that's the one that's true. That's the truth sort of seeping its way through. That's the truth kind of rising to the surface. And I'm just thinking, well, not exactly. I mean, it seems like at that point in 2012, Jerry and Kate have accepted that Madeleine was dead. But the entire thing that we're discussing here is, were they responsible for her murder? Or has it just been 5 years after her disappearance, that was recorded in 2012, the interview, that they just had given up hope and they thought that there was no chance? But what Kate was saying, though, is that she believed that this was an example of when if she's dead, then there's going to be no search and they're not going to find any more answers. So if anything, she's saying that she just wants it to be open to more information, to really try and be fair to the McCanns. That's the idea that they're expressing, and that doesn't sound like it's what the deception detective made it out to be at all. And the reason why I am so critical of this guy, who's a podcaster and YouTuber, is when he says that, oh, this is how people talk when they're lying. Well, I've had many experiences when people have accused me of lying when I've been telling the truth. And in his other videos, sometimes he has some more impressive stuff, like when people say something to the effect of, I really didn't steal that bike, and they actually stole the bike. He even talked about this in the same Madeleine McCann series. I really didn't steal that bike. Yes, of course, that's a suspicious statement, and that's a giant red flag, because that's awkward and unnatural English. But have you ever said something to the effect of, I really don't know, when you actually didn't know something? I definitely have, and I don't necessarily think that that's an immediate indicator of deception. And one thing that I noticed about the deception detective from looking at his videos in the past, again, particularly the JonBenet Ramsey case, was when he's just pointing at things when people are trying to take the blame off of themselves. I really don't know. I really didn't do that. Now, that doesn't mean the person is lying. They're trying to explain and show a very strong reason or a strong emotion to indicate that they are not lying. And he's not the only person who pushes this type of statement analysis stuff. I mean, people have talked about this in the O.J. Simpson case. They've talked about it in the Amanda Knox case, about how people are talking in open words instead of contractions. Instead of saying, I don't know, they say, I do not know, when they are lying. In terms of probability, that's more likely to be a lie when somebody is confronted, because when people are under pressure, they say things quickly when they're telling the truth. I don't know, not I do not know. I've done both, you've done both, everybody's done both. That's one of the reasons why these types of statement analyses don't really impress me, because just because somebody breaks their words apart, it doesn't mean that they're lying. And, it's a linguistic choice. How about this one, what's not being taken into account? Awkward personalities, insecurities, and something that is bothering somebody. The deception detective even said, now if I call you purple, that might not hurt your feelings, but if you're low IQ and I tell you that you're low IQ, you're going to be bothered by that. I will offer a direct challenge. You will only be bothered by it if you're insecure about it. Person X will only be bothered by that if they're insecure about it. If you call me low IQ and I'm just like, Yeah, I'm low IQ, and I don't care. I mean, something like that. It's just not going to be the same every time. And it's also not accounting for different personality traits. It's not accounting for different types of brain chemistry, different moods and feelings. Someone might not want to talk about something. Discomfort, how about that? So I'm really just very critical of these types of observations because they almost make it seem like this is what liars behave like. No, no. This is what people behave like when they're being asked questions, and human behavior is so different among other people that you're not just going to behave in a certain way when you're lying. Like, people also analyze eye movements, facial expressions. Now, I don't completely dismiss it. I get bad vibes from people. I don't like the way that someone is acting. But to say that they are just these red flags of deception, I think goes a little bit too far. And we're going to see some of that in the next clip. I'm going to play one more clip from the Deception Detective. It's about 2 minutes long, and then we're going to have a response. Let me know what you think here, and let's bring the Deception Detective back on.
In your book, you mentioned that you have been perceived as cold in a way.
Well, someone's always got an opinion, and I think we've learned how judgmental people can be. I mean, I think it's maybe part of human nature. We're all quick to judge from a position of ignorance.
Is there a right way of grieving and a wrong way of grieving?
Well, exactly. I mean, how should a mother or father grieve when their child is abducted? And
I think the other thing people probably don't.
It's also interesting how she puts it in the hypothetical. How should a mother grieve when her child is abducted? She wants us to believe that her child was abducted, right? She should be part of that group. What you would expect her to say is, how do you want me to grieve? My child was abducted. Sorry if I'm not grieving the way you expect. But instead she says it in the hypothetical, right? She doesn't put herself in the group of mothers whose children are abducted. She's almost asking it like an actor. How should I act if my child were abducted? Right? How does a mother whose child was abducted act? Because that's probably what she asks herself every day before every interview.
I don't understand it.
Right, so let's listen again. Right, and now, does this mean she's a liar? No. But like I said, with enough drops make a flood. So already in the first part of this interview, we've had plenty of things for me to feel confident in betting that they know what actually happened to Madeleine and that they know Madeleine is dead. Regarding the details of how she died and what they did with the body, I would need to watch more interviews. But at the rate of leakage they have, right, at the rate of things they reveal by their words, we could probably piece it together. And that's why I think...
Okay, and once again, that was the Deception Detective. And I told you guys that I had followed his videos about the murder of JonBenet Ramsey from 1996, and I have countless episodes about that case here on this channel. One more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe if you want to follow along with these true crime discussions here on BBOR. But in the JonBenet case, this guy was definitely more focused on the deception tactics, not just saying something to the effect of, well, it seems like she's talking in a hypothetical. It seems like she's saying something that, oh, well, how should a mother grieve versus how should I grieve? Then she's just saying that, well, if it actually happened to a mother, what would they do in that situation? I do not like the analysis. I do not like everything you heard in that little 2-minute clip because, firstly, he's not even focusing on the red flags of deception. He's just saying that he doesn't like her awkward word choice. And from watching his JonBenet videos, I know that he has better material than this. For example, with the JonBenet case, he just hammered down on Patsy Ramsey because he's talking about everything I said at the beginning. If you know everything, then some of the truth will come out. There is this type of leakage. He said that in the Madeleine McCann video, but he didn't identify the red flags. In the JonBenet case, he's saying, all right, when Patsy Ramsey made her 911 call, she didn't say hurry. She said, please hurry. She didn't say, I found a note. She said, I just found a note. She's adding additional words that are intensifying the situation, which don't need to be there to communicate the message, because that's what people do when they're not telling the truth. They have a blend of facts and a blend of falsehoods. And there's also information that they're trying to keep secretive. So to keep that secretive, they put extra information, extra verbiage, and extra ideas out there, even extra vocabulary words into the mix. And all of that stuff was identified in the Jean Bonnet case. Now, it wasn't perfect. If you go through my older episodes, you can definitely hear me talking about the deception detective and some issues where I would challenge him, but I didn't hear any of that in these clips. I mean, if anything, he's just saying, well, she's not making it extremely personable. She's not necessarily talking about how she would feel. She just kind of said that as a general statement. I get the suspicion, but that doesn't mean that that's a lie. Just because she said that in a general way, in a hypothetical way, that doesn't mean that that's a false statement. So in a lot of ways, I think the deception detective is doing a big disservice to this case. And he's doing a disservice because he supports a theory that many people do entertain. And at this point, I'm fully aware that Jerry and Kate have been quote-unquote cleared in the investigations, but the majority of the people who look into the Madeleine McCann case believe that they are guilty, and I think that somebody like the deception detective is really just adding a contaminant to that particular theory. He's not helping the cause. If anything, he's just adding confusion or making people pay attention to stuff that they don't necessarily need to pay attention to. So I would also like to just add some things that he's responding to this one. And later on in the video, he's going to talk about how they're just so obsessed with her being abducted. They talk about this multiple times. She was abducted. How do they know that she was abducted? Was it not an accidental death? Was it not Madeleine wandering away and falling in the construction pit? Even last week on this segment, I talked about the theory that Madeleine may have been hit by a car. She wandered out of the apartment and been hit by a car. Well, why are they so focused on the abduction thing? This is taking that interview out of context. Number one, they also state in the same interview, in clips that you didn't hear, that Jerry and Kate had endorsed the Tanner Man sighting. That's why I told you. That's so valuable. And this was done in 2012. The interview with Skavlan that you heard there was from 2012. And they were just saying they thought the Tanner Man abducted Madeleine McCann. That's not just entertaining a possibility. They had endorsed that theory, saying that they thought that she had been abducted by the Tanner Man. And Jane Tanner saw the man carrying a girl that looked like Madeleine, or resembled Madeleine's size, more or less. And she provided the details for the composite drawing of the Tanner Man and the young girl. But a different holiday maker at the resort in Praia de Luz said, no, I think that was me. And I was carrying my own daughter, and he even provided the clothes that he could have been wearing that night. And it really does look like the same person. He's just saying, no, I had no part in that. And this was just another guy walking with his daughter at around the same time. So if anything, it's a red herring. I've said it once and I'll say it again. The Tanner Man sighting is the biggest red herring in the Madeleine McCann case. But in 2012, it seems like Jerry and Kate believed that. Or at the very least, they shared that publicly, that they believed that the Tanner Man was responsible. Also, why are they so certain that it was an abduction? Well, Kate talked about this in her book, Madeleine, when she said that she believed that it was an abduction because Madeleine would have had to have gotten out of bed, gone out the back patio door, gone through a child safety gate and the exit gate to the apartment suite in Praia de Luz, and close all of them gently behind without leaving anything ajar or anything mishandled or rough. And she just said that she didn't believe that 3-year-olds would respond that way, or they would be that meticulous when it would come to closing doors and gates. And absolutely nothing looks like it's left even the slightest bit ajar. You might disagree with that, but that's the explanation that Kate provided in her book, Madeleine. So just saying, why are they so obsessed with this abduction theory and not accidental death? Well, I mean, they've addressed this stuff in other forms of media, so in some ways the clips are out of context. But overall, I'm not dismissive of the theory that involves the parents. I think the timelines are rather sketchy, and once I listened back to my old episodes and I heard the theory about how there was this theory that Madeleine was placed on the shelf in the cabinet, her body was hidden, and then they moved her at a later date to perhaps even the ocean, or at some point, maybe the rental car was used and they took her to a final resting place. Okay. I'm much more open to that. I'm mostly not in alignment with the theory that she fell off the couch and broke her neck, because I don't think that that would have been enough time for the cadaver dog to get the scent, and that might have been a misleading theory. I also do not think that that would be something that they would necessarily try to cover up. Say, for example, even if Matthew Oldfield goes into the apartment, he certainly didn't report seeing that. And I just don't think that there's enough time. That is so contingent on a small time window, whereas the theory of Madeleine being buried at at a different location has a big window of time. So I'm just trying to going at this at a logical way by saying that big time window versus small time window. And I would really like to know what you think. You can put your responses in the comments section down below. What do you think happened to Madeleine McCann? And my overall conclusion is, I'm open to the theory involving the parents, but I think the deception detective did a disservice to that theory. Please put your responses in the comments section down below, and this will be the final episode in this series on Madeleine McCann, because next week I'm going to be revisiting a case that I've talked about before on Black Box Online Radio, and that is the disappearance of Maura Murray from 2004, doing another missing persons case. And I really don't do a lot of missing persons cases here on Black Box Online Radio, but I had the opportunity to interview somebody named Tim Wallace, who was a follower of the Maura Murray case, and he actually requested to come on Black Box Online Radio. The interview that we did was about 1 hour and 40 minutes long, and you guys were sending me all kinds of things. Oh, hey, you just did a Maura Murray episode. Well, what about this list of questions that somebody sent me? Oh, you just did a Maura Murray episode? Well, you should really check out these resources. So you guys gave me a lot of homework, and that's what's encouraged me to take that up for the Tuesday show. So please tune in next Tuesday for an episode about the disappearance of Maura Murray. And you can follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, my name is Ned DeHaan. And on Instagram, blackboxonlineradio, and I use these pages to release shorts and reels Monday through Friday, which mostly talk about serial killers, unsolved mysteries, or anything under the sun or in the darkness. I also do episodes about the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, the Black Dahlia, and D.B. Cooper. And if you want to support all of these efforts, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxonlineradio, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And I'll see you tomorrow for an episode about Jack the Ripper. Until next time.